Welcome back to the Business Pulse podcast. My name is Candice Jarrett. Today we're talking to Angelo Ponzi, Fractional CMO and founder of Craft, whose clients are primarily small to medium-sized businesses with annual revenues between $5 million and $75 million, spanning B2B, B2C, and D2C markets. We'll talk about all that today and more on episode 9. This is the Business Pulse podcast, where you'll discover strategies, tools, and stories to inspire success through conversations with leading business owners, startup founders, and venture capitalists. Our aim is your success. Presented by XKOVA, a next-generation payment processor to help your business thrive. Visit us at xkova.com. Hi, Angelo. Thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. I like your opening there. It was I forgot that was going to happen, so it was fun.
Thank you very much. I made that myself, actually, because I do a little video editing. So thank you. So actually, I wanted to ask about your journey. So you work with marketing and branding and also helping businesses grow. How did you end up in this business?
Yeah, so my journey, and it's obviously a long journey, but I have advertising agency experience. I have client-side experience, but I also had, prior to doing this, consulting experience. So throughout my career, I always ended up being the person that was doing research or doing the plans, whether it was the agency side or on the client side. And as that kind of became a skill set along with research, which I use tremendously, it really started to lay the foundation of who I am and what I do and what I think needs to be done in order to develop effective marketing plans. And I use marketing in the broad sense because most time when we say marketing, people start thinking about tactics, and I'm kind of the complete opposite. I want to break down the market. I want to look at your competition. I want to talk to your customers. I want to understand all the KPIs and dig into your books and look at how revenue is growing and what's happening with each client, looking at profitability. So I'm very strategic in the sense and analytical. I've been told, and I've actually held this position before, that a better title for me is Chief Strategy Officer, but I'm a marketing guy at heart, so I say marketing, but I really dig into the data. And so I'll say in previous lives, we called it just contract marketing or outsourced marketing, right? So I at one point in time when I had my own advertising agency, my client was frustrated. He actually hired me to be their VP of marketing, but still allowed my agency to work for him. Probably that was the coolest because I was getting paid on both ends. But in my last, which is a little over 10 years ago, I was director of sales and marketing for a company, and we had a government side and commercial side. I was obviously on the commercial side. And I was told that small mom and pop, $30 million company, been around for 35 years, and we got acquired. And the new CEO is giving a presentation about the company's future. And at the end of the meeting, I raised my hand and said, my division wasn't up on the wall. And I watched him panic and do a little song and dance. And I came home that night and I just told him, I can't do this anymore. I'm just going to go back and start my own thing again. So I had a conscious choice. Do I become an agency again, or do I do what I really love? And I mean, you can't throw a rock without hitting a digital marketing firm or an SEO firm. But that's not really where I like to play, because I'm a strong belief that if you don't have an understanding of the market that you're competing in, how do you drive tactics? How do you communicate? How do I message? How do I know what's going to change your behavior if I've never talked to you? And so, I try to get out of I tell clients, get out of the boardroom, quit talking to yourselves. You think you know, but you don't really know. And frankly, I've proved it. 10 years was April, so whatever, that's 10 years, 5 months, 6 months. And all the times I've talked to customers for clients, I always walk away with something they want. Holy, you know what? I wish we had done this sooner. So anyway, that's how I got into this, and that's how I stay in this kind of area.
That's amazing. I like how you said that people say that you should be a strategy officer. And I do feel that marketing is a lot of strategy. I mean, to do it well,
Yes.
So can you talk about what it means to be a fractional CMO and how that is different and perhaps even more beneficial for a company than having someone in-house?
Sure. Well, especially in the small to medium-sized businesses, a lot of them that I work with, I mean, honestly, they couldn't afford somebody with, and now it's still weird saying this, right? But they couldn't afford somebody with my experience and longevity in the market um, without paying a lot of money. So on a fractional basis, then it allows them to tap into my experience, for a fraction of the cost by buying a fraction of my time. That is the way it's simply put. So somebody will talk and they'll say, hey, I need to understand how big my market is, but I want you to vet my current employees. Do I have the right guys on the bus, guys and gals on the bus? Here are the things we want to accomplish. What do you think? And I'll work and I'll say, okay, I think that's going to be, 10 hours a week on site and then maybe another 5 hours off site. And then we negotiate and then they'll purchase a chunk of my time. But the important part for me is I have to be looked at as a board member. I mean, not board member, but a strategic leader. You can't think of me as the guy that's not in the office every day. So I have to have a seat at the table or it doesn't work. I have to have direct communication with the CEO. And just like a VP or a head of operations or COO, anybody else, I have to have that role. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. Then I just become a facilitator. And if I wanted to be a facilitator, then I would have started a tactical agency, and that's not what I want to do. So I do get into those situations where, I start getting asked to do a lot of tactical things. And depending on the client, we might do some. I have a small team that can execute that kind of stuff. But mostly I partner with other folks or they have staff. I had a client, not last year, the year before, an in-house agency. 15 people on staff. And then I've worked with companies that had nobody. I have a client right now that has no marketing people.
I was actually just going to ask that, because you obviously only have a certain amount of time in your day to allocate. So how do you decide which clients you take on and then which ones maybe your team handles more?
Sure. As it moves to, so there's certain things in the process that we do that absolutely require me. And then there's some that don't. Do I do them? Yes, I did do them, but now I have some people that can do that. And it's an interview. There's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, like a podcast. There's how many thousands of words that are on a piece of paper. So I don't think about making notes or writing all that down. I just transcribe it. And then I have other people go in based on my criteria and pull out all the salient points. And then it comes back to me and it goes back to them. And so I don't have to do some of that work. But there's just some stuff when it comes to data and analysis that's just absolutely requires me. So it's kind of depends. I don't have any junior people. They're all senior people. So that helps. Big trust and confidence that if I give them an assignment, I'm not worried about it getting done.
That's critical. It really is. So you had mentioned actually that some of your clients ask you if their team that they have built is the right team. What qualities do you look for in those people to decide whether or not they're right for someone's marketing team?
Sure. Well, part of it is about, what they're doing. So I worked this company that I worked for had the 15 people on staff. That was part of my assignment was vet these people. The person that was there before let it turn into a toxic workplace. He picked out a couple people and they became his right hand team, and the rest of the people were kind of on the outskirts. And so there was a lot of resentment going on that they weren't participating. They were being told and didn't have a chance to, help shape and do those things. And so there was a lot of infighting. So when I came in and I knew this, the first thing I did is I called a staff meeting. And the interesting thing, the CEO wasn't even there. He was on the East Coast. So I was there by myself. They didn't really know me. They knew I was coming, but some people looked me up. And so I had a meeting about who I am and what I do and my philosophies and what I would be looking for. And then I went back and they brought him in one by one and had to ask them questions about, what they liked, what they were doing, what were the issues, what weren't they able to accomplish? How did they feel about their participation? Because I believe that this employees that are participating, they need to understand their role in the company, not just their function, but their role and how it has an impact. And I try to explain, even with marketing, right? We do something, it generates a lead, it goes on to sales, they get an order, it goes to order entry, then it goes to accounting, and then the parts have to be either assembled or put together or shipped or whatever it happens to be, and it goes into all these other departments. If everybody doesn't understand how all that works in their roles and kind of the piece of the puzzle, then there's a breakdown. And so we can say, hey, we did our job, but they broke down. Well, why'd they break down? Did they not know it was coming? Where there was no communication? And so I do spend a lot of time working internally as well to try to make sure that the processes are there, that people understand the workflow, understand that by you sitting on it for 5 hours just means somebody else's job just got harder, and why it's important to keep things going. I'm making some of this up, but so I'm a holistic marketer, if you will. I'll take a view of everything I do. So I don't just sit in marketing. I tend to go across a lot of different departments. I've actually, even in my tenure, I've had an opportunity for companies to run their HR. I ran accounting, ran sales. A lot of people ran HR. I go, well, I got involved because the recruiters didn't understand who and why they were recruiting. So the person recruiting for marketing had no idea about marketing and didn't understand the kind of criteria that we were looking for. So I got into helping to train those people to, here's what you're looking for, here's questions you need to ask. And that was fun, a little diversification, if you will.
It's interesting you bring that up, because it makes me think about this thing that I heard recently where a bunch of executives had run their own resumes through their HR's process because their HR was using an AI, and all of them were auto rejected. And so I feel it's what you said is so true. I mean, it's human resources, and I feel that that's probably one of the industries where, I mean, AI has obviously like streamlined a lot of things. It's really made a lot of processes great, but I think this is one area that you really do need a human, because you can't always tell somebody's capabilities by their resume. And you like walked into that role because you understood, like, I need somebody who has this particular skill set and also maybe this type of personality. And you just can't tell that from a piece of paper.
No, you can't. And everybody has a different viewpoint, right? It's, I might say, hey, I like you for the job. And then somebody else comes in and says, well, I didn't feel it, or whatever happens. There was an interview I had this, I don't know, 7 years ago. And the recruiter came in and said, this girl's great. I needed somebody to run my trade show business. And she came in and she was so nervous. I mean, she literally had her hand up her pant leg and was cross-legged on the chair. And she couldn't look me in the eye. And at the end, I went, you told me this girl was fantastic. I just don't see it. And, I didn't. He goes, I'm telling you, she was just nervous. And he talked me into bringing her back. And then this time I went into it with let's have a cup of coffee, whatever. Let's just relax. Let's not sit in the office. We're going to go someplace that's more comfortable. And I hired her. She was fantastic. But because I was, I was following somebody's direction, and he hyped me and set me up, and then the expectation was there. And then of course she didn't meet it. So I always, again, concerned about that. But when you do a lot of interviewing, you find a lot of people just absolutely horrible at doing interviews. And then this with Zoom, I mean, I literally have been interviewing people on Zoom, and I can see that they're off on their phone while they're talking. And that's like, I want to yell out, are you serious? I can see you, right? I know you're not really looking at me. I mean, I can see that you're looking, or you're reading something off your screen because your eyes are diverted all the time. So anyway, off on a tangent there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, actually, I feel like it's on point, because technology has changed everything. I mean, it's changed hiring. It's changed sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. I think maybe from an interview standpoint, someone might be more comfortable in their own home, rather than going to an office. So maybe it's good for them over Zoom. But then, of course, I just think I'm glad that you shared the story about the woman who was nervous, and then you gave her a second chance and then interviewed her in a different way, because you saw through from, your friend's perspective, that she was actually good, but just a bad interviewer. I mean, some people are amazing in their role, but just bad interviewer.
And some people are great interviewers and bad in the role. So, I mean, it's
True.
the, we talk about AI and we talk about technology, and I actually have an AI client and they're building bots and all this kind of stuff, right? But at the end of the day, somebody has to program it, somebody has to run it, someone has to interpret it. And so the human element isn't totally out of it. But I think that as time goes on, and every time I think about this company, I start thinking Skynet, from Terminator. But
Yeah.
but there are some jobs are going to be replaced because it's so an interesting way to look at this is we talk about the technology part of it, but actually, if you think about it, it's more about the human part of it, right? Because that tech is really going to impact a job. Do I need to spend, again, making this up, $20 an hour for a customer service person when I can basically create an avatar that can answer all the questions that I need? And, it's just costing me whatever it is on AWS, right? So I think there's going to be that kind of a change going on. We're already starting to see some of it. About a year ago, in my mind, it was kind of like when I first heard about ChatGPT. I mean, I just had no idea what it was. And then I heard about it, and then I was at a meeting, and a digital agency guy was there, and he stood up and said, "I fired all my copywriters, and I'm only using ChatGPT." And I was like, well, first of all, that was probably really dumb, because I played with it, and it's not that good, and
No.
nobody really understood prompt engineering and all that kind of stuff. And it's literally about a little over a year later, and now I'm dealing with companies that are building autonomous agentic AI and bots that can communicate in a centralized or decentralized situation. So my bot can talk to your bot, can make an order, can go out and do pricing, can do customer service, can do counseling, a bank. I mean, it's going very quickly. And as you probably see in your emails, I mean, every other email, somebody's trying to sell me my digital twin or something like that.
Yeah, I think that, it is a sad fact of life that AI is going to replace jobs. But I think ultimately the opportunity that business professionals need to recognize now is that they can use AI to make themselves more productive, to make themselves more valuable, because I think a lot of companies are trying to replace employees with AI. And it is so premature and even dangerous, I think, in some instances. Like there was this one example that I gave the other day that it was a company had a meeting with a client on like a Zoom and had an AI taking notes. Well, the AI took notes from that one and a private internal VC conversation later and sent all of it to the client.
Ooh.
So yeah, that. So a real human assistant would not have done that. They would have known that it was a critical error on their point. So I think that a lot of companies are just very excited, very hyped. I mean, AI is great. It is amazing. It makes things so productive. It saves so much time to give you time to either expand your business or do so many things. However, there are a lot of pitfalls that we can't rely on it. Not definitely. So I want to ask you, because you've been doing marketing branding for a long time, and you see probably companies getting really excited about using AI for marketing, maybe like social media strategy, or what are, I think, the greatest benefits that you see that it can help companies with more effective marketing, and also their greatest pitfalls?
I think right now, for me, the biggest benefit is ideation. It's a great way to come up with ideas and maybe even brainstorm, right? It's, that just to go out and, hey, write me a press release or, develop me a social media campaign. Those that do that and then just assume it's correct is where they're going to get in trouble. And so even if you're doing that, like I use it actually earlier today, I needed a picture for a blog that was being placed for a client. I couldn't find a picture. So I went in and spent, 20 minutes constantly doing prompts to change it. And I ended up with a a picture I could use for the blog. Now, it took me 20 minutes, but the fact is I couldn't find what I needed. And so I used it. Now, if I had not just said, hey, create a picture and grabbed it and ran the first one that came out of the chute, it couldn't read it. The words were all looked like gobbledygook. And so I think it's caution. It's people have to understand that it's not perfect. And especially depending on what you're using and whether you've got a closed system or an open system, right? Like some models like ChatGPT, unless you toggle a certain button, everything you do goes into their ecosystem and it feeds, right? That's how it's learning. But you can actually turn some of that off, so create kind of your own, I'll use the word data lake, in a sense that you're in your own environment. So if I want to write an article about a client and I just go out and say, write something, it may or may not be pulling the right stuff. It may be pulling stuff from competitors versus if I have a kind of a closed environment and feed it the information, then I at least know it's working within the confines of my client. So I'm always cautious about that. And then, but the ideation thing is pretty cool because you can certainly, I'm trying to do some kind of strategy or trying to think of something or what some of the issues. I ran something earlier today. It was like, what are the price points on X, Y, and Z? And it came back with some data on it. And I said, okay, let me go test it, see if that made sense. And it got validated by several other GPT stuff or chats. But again, if I had just ran with it, I could have been way off or given somebody the wrong information. And I think that's even true with a lot of different things. And you doing secondary research. I mean, if you're not, I always tell people when we do secondary research it's not about getting the data. It's about who did the data and where it came from, right? If I take something from Gartner and I tell you it's from them, you're going to go, okay, they're a trusted organization. But if I said, hey, Bob's a really good research company, who's Bob? And so know where it's coming from. You always have to, and again, what you're using it for, you always have to be careful. And so again, that's my cautiousness about just using it as it comes off the press, so to speak, in making sure that you kind of validate that it's good information.
Kind of shifting gears a little bit, I had noticed on your website that you've worked with some really big brands. And I want to ask you, for you personally, do you prefer to work with big established brands, or do you like to work with new brands who are kind of fresh and kind of finding their way?
So I would say at the end of the day, I like to work with brands and the reason I go 5 million and up, because ultimately when you get into startups, which I haven't been doing for a long time, for the reason that I'm about to say, but I have been doing them lately, is they don't have any money. And so it's a lot of guerrilla marketing and stuff like that. So it's fun when they listen. And so, so I got something the other day from a client, from a completely different person. I have no idea who it is, and it's being passed on to me. It's like, well, why is this person doing this stuff? Doesn't make any sense. So there's a lot of loosey-goosiness in the small and startups. On the flip side, with very large organizations, they have money, a lot of really cool stuff, but there's also a lot of bureaucracy. And so to get something done, sometimes it takes a long time. Like one of the companies I was working for, we were working with a large medical company, and 8 months before I actually got the contract signed. Well, by then the client was moving on and using people they'd already used. And so at the end of the day, we lost the business because the lawyers took so long to get through the contracts. And so that's the downside, but the upside is they got a lot of money to spend, but you also have to put a lot of justifications on spending that money.
So as far as, I guess, a fun client to work with is probably something in the middle where they have enough money to like do something fun, but not so much red tape that you can't like experiment and get, moving quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of sweet spot of, let's say, 20 million to 50 million, they might have some people, they might even have some partners, but they don't have necessarily a strategic leader. And so that's where it can get really fun. And then the revenues go up. Eventually, there's going to be someone like me, or they're going to want to bring a full-time person in. But that's where I've been having fun in that middle of that bandwidth, because there's some money to do some things with. There's a reason for growth and all this kind of stuff. Versus, hey, we're allocating every dollar that we have to buy products so we can meet demand that we currently have. So we're not going to do any marketing. But it's like, yeah, if you don't do that any marketing, then you're not really building your brand. You're just kind of fulfilling the people that know about you. So so that kind of becomes a little frustrating in dealing with smaller organizations.
So, what do you see the future of like traditional print? Like, so do you still do a lot of traditional print media, or is it mostly online? Do you think everything will move online in the future? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when everybody yelled, print is dead, and I didn't believe it, and it still does exist. I ran a print ad last year for a client, and it was probably the first one that I ran in 5 years. And strategically, it made sense. But most print properties have digital properties. And so I think moving more and more that way. I mean, I actually get a couple of magazines still to the house, but half the time I find myself just going online and looking up. I think our behaviors have changed. And I think depending on the demographic that you're looking at, it's really going to behave. So as the 30s, the 20s and the 30s and even the 40s are in business and doing things, there's probably less likely they're turning to magazines versus their phone. I'm a little older than that, so I'm like, I'll pick up paper. Matter of fact, I print out everything. I probably kill more trees than I used to, because I like to touch it and write on it, versus my kids who are older in business. I never see them hardly ever print anything. It's all on their phone or on their computer or on their tablet. So I think that evolution is going to force less and less kind of traditional magazines and things like that.
Actually, I'm with you on the print. I need to print things out. I love having no distraction. There's no device, there's no computer. There's just, I have some things that are printed and I've got my highlighter.
Yep, I got a bunch of those too.
Yeah. I mean, it really does, it makes you work in a different way. It's like the idea of reading a paperback or reading an ebook. I mean, you can read an ebook sometimes, but sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, no, sometimes it's just nice to have something physical in your hands. So, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I actually was traveling recently, and for the first time in a few years, I actually bought a book versus downloading the ebook and taking my tablet. And I said, I want to touch it and turn the page, and it was great. I loved it.
Do you mind sharing what book it was?
I got it right here. It's Clive Clusser. You know Clive Clusser? I don't know if you can see it.
No. Is it political?
No. There's some politics to it, but it's more an adventurer. His character is called Dirk Pitt. As a matter of fact, he actually named his son Dirk. The writer's Clive Clusser, and I've read a lot of his books over the years. And then his son got old enough, started writing with him, and he actually named his son after the character he created. And it's about underwater adventure and treasure and all this kind of stuff. And I've read a ton of them. And then I kind of started putting them on audio. And then I started, because I was driving a lot, and I went to putting them on my tablet. And then I found that I would get headaches from the tablet. And so, yeah, again, just traveling, I'm going to go buy a book and actually do it. So, I read a lot. I got papers, I got research reports, and I'm always reading something, but that pleasure side of reading, it kind of gets a little on the elusive side. So I kind of been making that a goal of mine to get back to reading. There was a point in time when I had my advertising agency. I don't know how that happened, but I literally would probably read, 2 books a week. And, now I'm lucky if I read, for pleasure, a book a quarter.
Sorry, my dog I had to mute myself because my dog is losing his mind. He wants his ball. Yeah, I feel the same way. Like there's just not enough hours in the day to like read I think it's so important to read for pleasure. It really is, because I think that it does something different with your mind, especially in a creative industry like marketing. It's probably nice to move your creative energy in a different direction, of like relaxing with a book that's fiction.
Yeah, I play music too, so I've been actually.
Oh, what kind of music do you play?
I play mostly classic rock, that kind of stuff. But I just about a year started a new band, and we're called Kai and the Eclipse. And Kai is actually one of the guy's dogs, a little Yorkie that comes to our practices, and he literally just likes to sit in the middle of everything. And you would think the music would bother him, but it doesn't. I mean, because we're amplified, and he just loves sitting right in the middle or laying in the cases. So we called the band after him. And then but when you look at the music we play, it's literally from the 60s and 70s and the 80s and 90s. So very eclectic. And so hence the name Eclectics. And so we've gigged now twice, which has been a lot of fun. I used to play a lot over the years, and I probably had a 10-year break. And so this started the year before. We're just jamming with some guys for fun. And then I ran into some old guys that I played with, and then they wanted to get together. And next thing you know, we got a gigging band, which should have been fun.
That's awesome. And that sounds so fun.
Yeah.
So what do you play in the band? Do you play guitar?
I'm playing bass in this band. I do play guitar and I do play drums, but in this one I'm playing bass guitar.
I feel like bass lives in the intersection between drums and guitar, because obviously it has a melody, but it's got percussion.
Yeah, it does. It's funny when I was always played drums, and then at one point in time in my life I wanted to play guitar, so I learned how to play guitar rhythm. I could never figure out lead guitar. I think I just didn't have the patience for it. And then in the band that I was playing in, we ended up having the bass player leave the band, and we auditioned a bunch of people. But now we're a family. We've been playing together for 5 years, and now we're letting strangers in, right? And so finally I just said, look, I'll teach myself bass. So I got off bass, and at first it was hard because I also sing, and I just couldn't. It was like, oh my God, this is going to be so hard. Why did I do this? And then I realized one day, I was like, wait a minute, I just need to be in syncopation with the drums. That'll find my rhythm for me. And then that's how I was able to learn how to play it. So now I play and sing, and it's fun.
I tried briefly to learn bass. It's so hard. It really is. I think it's a difficult instrument.
Do you play?
But well, I used to play guitar, okay. And so I was like, oh, I'll play bass. How hard could it be? It's less strings. Nope, way hard.
For some reason, I can't get to lead guitar, but I can move my fingers around on the bass guitar. Maybe just because they're big. I don't know. But that's one of my frustrations over my lifetime, is not getting to that lead guitar thing. As a kid, you kind of get a guitar and you play around on it, and then you go like, well, I'd rather go play baseball or something, right? So over the years, I kept coming back to it, and then there was one point in time I was just very committed, and I was playing it in a band for 5, 6, 7 years. And when that band broke up, it was just about the time I was starting my advertising agency. And so I literally just shoved it under the bed and didn't touch it for, 10 years. And my oldest at the time, who was 12, he said, hey, I want to learn to play guitar. And I said, I've got a guitar. I pulled it out from under the bed, and it was a Stratocaster. And he looked at it, he goes, well, that's old. I don't want an old guitar. And I went, you know what? You're right.
Just old guitars are like the best guitars.
It's like, you're right. You're not going to play this one. I went and bought him another one. And then while I was there, I went, well, I think I need another new one. And that kind of started me playing again.
Oh, that's awesome. So your experience with your band, did you do marketing for that band? I mean, even in an informal way back then?
For that band, yes. Actually, that band, not the current band, not the last band, but the band before that, which went about, I think we went about 8 or 9 years. I was kind of the band promoter. And so I booked the gigs, found the gigs, booked the gigs, and handled all the money and stuff. But ultimately, that's what was one of the reasons the band broke up. One of the guys decided after all those years that, why was I getting an extra 10%? And even though I was working for it, we had started some infighting and stuff. And then then once that started, it just rapidly went downhill. And it was too bad too, because that was it was a good, we were really good.
Yeah, it's the way it goes. I mean, so many great brands break up that way. But you were using a skill that you had to like benefit the band. I mean, and that's why I thought, given that you love marketing and branding, that was probably something that you applied to other things that you had done. So I guess I want to ask, so I know we've gone over time. Do you still have a few more minutes? Okay, great. So is there like one piece of marketing advice that you would give any client who came to you, like, this is an important thing that you should do?
I think the one thing that I always advise is we have to talk to your customers. We have to understand their perception of you. We have to understand what motivates them to buy, whether it's you or somebody else. What are those behaviors that they go through? What's that kind of criteria list? If we don't really know it, how can we change it? Figure out where we're having issues. And you can, there's certain things you can only get by talking to them. And it amazes me that a lot of companies just don't truly talk to their customers. And to me, that's a way to understand and keep a pulse. It also, like when I do research and talk to clients, customers, they always get accolades. Go, hey, we want to thank you for doing this. This was really good. We enjoyed being able to be very detailed with what we need versus telling the sales guy things are good, or that kind of stuff. It comes back filtered bias. I have no skin in the game, so I'm not going to bias anything. And so they start to see the value. Now, on the flip side, a lot of times it's a one and done. They don't think about it as something they need to do on a regular basis. I've had clients that we were doing research every 90 days because things were changing. We needed to understand, what was going on, and you can't do that by just doing it. And then the same thing with competitors. I mean, a lot of companies don't actually have a strong competitive intelligence program. They might have some insights, but they don't really pay attention to the details, at least in the way I think they should. So that would be the one piece, is like, spend time, put something formal that you can repeat so you can measure, and dig into, your customers. Just because they're buying from you doesn't necessarily mean they're happy. Right. And we find stuff out. I mean, for a software company one time, the same thing. They've been our clients for years. They love us. And yet when we interviewed them, we found out that they really loved Becky, but they hadn't seen the owner of the company in 5-6 years. They had they couldn't even remember what he looked like. Yet the owner of the company is telling me everybody loves them. And what we uncovered is they were about ready to lose 2 of their biggest clients. Cool. And they had changed some of their offerings to make them more streamlined and more efficient. But their current clients didn't know about it because they didn't bother to go out and tell them. And so just stuff like that is just that constant making sure that your customers, I ask clients, and then I'll ask customers, do you think so Mr. Client, do you think your customers know all the products and services that you sell? 97% of them say no. And then I ask the customers, do you know all the products and services that your business partner sells? And it's around the same. They just don't know. They know what they're buying. And those, to me, those are opportunities. And you're leaving a gap for somebody else on the competitive side to get in there. Now, of course, they can steal the stuff you already have. So again, that's that strategic side. Why, how do you work with a company in plastics, so home compostable products, because of all the plastic bans going on? And we know they're there. They're not in every state. In some cases, like even California, you got a state ban, city bans, county bans. And so when, In-N-Out came to us and said, I want to buy a home compostable straw that can go across all my markets. Well, the markets were so varied because the rules and the laws were all different. It was not one law in California. So you couldn't go, I'll bring you one straw for Orange County, I'll bring you one straw for LA County, and I'll bring you one for, the Bay Area. They wanted just one. Well, we couldn't do it. Nobody could do it because the laws were written by, and a lot of these plastic ban laws were written by politicians who didn't really understand the difference of PHA and home compostable and all those kinds of things. So, by digging into all that kind of stuff, we were able to kind of really understand where the issues were, what the problems were. Understand simply selling to a fast food restaurant was different than selling to a convenience store. Thought process. Restaurant, come in, you get your soda, you buy your burger, you drink your soda, you throw it in the garbage, you leave. Convenience store, you drive up, you get your gas, you walk in, you get your Slurpee, you walk out the door, and you drive away. Good possibility that cup and straw are going to end up on the side of the road. And so that was a different mindset among that group, that they wanted to make sure that that straw got thrown out the window and landed on the dirt, it would decompose and go back to Mother Earth, if you will. And so just knowing those two different pieces of information changed the way we could market to those two different groups, because they had different concerns. So again, that's kind of the area that when I say people really have to spend their time with their customers and dig deep, ask questions. Again, it's not just about, I bought your product today. They bought it because maybe you're the only ones with it, but if you are, then they're searching for a replacement.
You give so much great insight in there. Like, just because your customers are buying from you doesn't mean they're happy. I mean, that's really great. And I think that is like eye-opening for a lot of businesses, because I think they probably do get comfortable and kind of feel like, status quo, but also the communication with the customer, customers not knowing everything that you have to offer. I think that from like a small business standpoint or a business standpoint, you sometimes feel like you're a broken record or you're repetitive if you say things over and over again, but you forget that not everybody is hearing your message all the time. Like even on social media, if you put out one blast, what percentage of your followers are going to actually see it? Probably a small percent. Yeah. I mean, even if you send out an email and you got a 30% open rate, 70% of your list didn't see your message.
And those are great points, right? And people go, hey, I got a 30% open rate. Yeah, but 70% of the people never got it. So why? Yeah. I did some work for a company recently, and they said, so a research project, and I wanted to use a panel, which is basically a group of people who have already agreed to participate. Anyway, they go, no, we've got this giant list that we market to all the time. And I remember saying, so what's your open rate on this list? And they didn't tell me, and they seemed to skirt the issue. So the list didn't work. And I remember being in a meeting and happened to blurt out that, hey, we tried the list and it didn't work and blah, blah, blah. And then I could see people's faces, going, oh my God, he just opened up a can of worms. But the bottom line is it didn't work. And I don't know how to, your 15,000 names that you're sending out emails to, how many are actually opening them. I mean, I see it in some of our client stuff. We've listed 3,000 and we typically get about 30% open rate. And I can go in and see it's the same people that are not opening. So are they just, is it spam filters? Is it they put you, so you go right into junk? I don't know. I don't know why they don't open.
Frequency, I mean, not adding enough value. There could be so many things.
Yeah, there's so many things. But that's about back to early, right? Research, understanding the data, spending time digging in. I have a client that when I started working for them, we spent a lot of time digging into their historical data. And they found that they won 30% of every proposal they put out the door over the 30 years on average. So then the question became, do you want to win 30% of $1,000 orders? Or you want to win 30% of $500,000 orders? Of course, they want the 500,000. So that now let's change the strategy, right? The average salesperson had 700 accounts. Well, there's no way they were all good accounts. Probably it was like the top 100 or so that was the real revenue generators. The rest were just, $1,000 here, $500 here. So do you let your head salesperson still control that? Or do you just say, look, let's bring you to an assistant, let them deal with the small stuff. You take a cut, they take a cut. And as and now go focus on bigger stuff where you're getting, the big bucks, so to speak. So anyway, that's the area that I really like to dig into. And again, eventually you got to do a tactic because you got to market the company and, get out there and expose your brand. But let's expose it with the right information that's relevant to the customer. And even the way you speak, right? It's this company I was talking about. So in the Christmas world and big decorations, and the way they talked and prior to me was, our product's great. It's going to weather the storm. You put it outside, won't weather with the rain, and quality, quality, quality. When I finished, it was, let's tell your customer, let's say a mall, that you're going to help create memories for their customers. They're going to come back to the mall. They want to bring their kids, take selfies, go see Santa, do all this stuff. That's a totally different piece of communication. A lot of value and benefit for the customer's customer, right? And oh, by the way, yes, our products are going to last. There's a reason to believe, not the reason to buy. And so, they flip the script and the way they communicate and the way they position, the way they market. And that really came out of just spending time digging and understanding and talking to people.
What is your favorite way to, I guess this will be my last question before we wrap up, but what's your favorite way to reach customers to get their feedback?
It's through either some kind of a research study, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, depending on what I need to do with it. If I need, So part of it is about what we're trying to accomplish. Like I just finished one. We were looking for feature sets for a new piece of software. Though that's more quantitative and statistical, right? We're not actually having conversations. They're, survey says. For the other ones where you're sitting down one-on-one and, having in-depth conversations, that you can kind of change direction based on what you hear. Because I always hear things like, well, that's interesting. The client didn't tell me any of that. Let me see if I hear it again. And if I hear it again, then I think it might be something to pursue. And so you get to bob and weave. Over the years, I used to do a lot of focus groups. And lately they got really expensive. But there were periods of times when, I was doing, 5, 6, 7 a month. And, same thing. You have a group of people, you're having a conversation. You're digging into the data. Those are great because you can, show them the product, if you will, or whatever it happens to be. And just having that interaction, you can see people's faces. That's why even on Zoom, right? We talked about this earlier. People are not paying attention, or you can tell who's engaged, who's not engaged. You can call people out. So even on this, it's better. But I can't put something in front of you unless it's a drawing or something. I can't actually give you the product unless I want to send it to you, which we've done before. You have a group, send them the product, have them check it, and you have these check-ins. So there's lots of different ways to approach it, but ultimately it's doing it.
I think that you're so right, and you bring such important insight. I think business owners are not their customers, and so they need to actually talk to their customers to find out like how to best serve them and what they want. So thank you so much for joining me today. This was an absolutely amazing conversation. So many good things in here. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
It's LinkedIn. That's the easiest. That'll have a link over to my website and everything. And on my website, there's a lot of resources. There's free ebooks. There's a mini marketing course. There's all sorts of stuff up there that people have access to.
That's fantastic. And what's the website address?
It's craft, CRAFT, marketingandbranding.com. That was a temporary URL, but unfortunately it's the one that has been there the longest. So it's a long story why I ended up with that versus the original one. But
actually, I think it's very memorable. I wanted you to be the one to say it. I didn't know.
Okay.
I was like, oh, that's a really good domain.
Yeah, it's just a little long for me,
Because
but now it's been 2 years. I'm not about to change it. But craftmarketingandbranding.com. And somebody asked me yesterday where craft came from. It was actually a name we used in 2008-ish, 9-ish. So my advertising agency, we sold it to another firm. we worked for them for 8 years, and then one day they said, we're going to move you. And I was like, no, I'm not moving. And so we went out and contacted people that we competed against over the years and who are freelancing. And we basically put together a dream team, if you will. And it was called Craft. And the problem is none of us realized that, 2008 and 9, the Great Recession, I literally had prospects say, I love what you've done. I really hate my agency, but at least I know them. I don't know you guys. I know you're a bunch of, kind of a band of gypsies put together. I don't know if you'll be here tomorrow. So I'm not going to take that chance. We heard that several times. And again, people didn't want to, literally, I'll use a bad agency instead of changing one. So we shelved the company. That's why I went back client side for a while. And then Craft a few years ago, we had a different name when we started. And then through doing, it was like, hey, we need a new name. And my partner was like, well, we have Craft. We should use that. It was a great name then. It's a great name now. So
I do feel it's a great name because it feels like bespoke or like human made, like personalized service. That's what it feels like to me. Craft marketing branding. Yeah, I thought it was great. So Angelo, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. This has been fun. Thank you. I really appreciate the conversation.
Super fun. Have a great Thanksgiving
You
tomorrow.
too.